Hi, this is Amy Peikoff, Don't Let It Go, and we are very happy to have a wonderful guest who I haven't gotten the privilege of speaking to for a long time. It's a little awkward, right, because we were indeed married for quite some time. This is Leonard Peikoff joining us today, and he wants to talk about the pandemic response, the dangers of totalitarianism that might be looming on the horizon, and what would be the proper way to try to stave that off. These are topics that we're very interested in hearing your opinion on, Leonard, so welcome.
Well, thank you. I have a very simple viewpoint, but it'll take me 3 minutes to elaborate. I believe that totalitarianism in the form of some kind of national socialism is on its way. That the Democrats are pushing for it and the Republicans are impotent. They're not strong enough. They don't fight it in the right way. If you want the details of why I think that's coming, you can ask me. We have a constitution which has checks and balances, but you can see that they are after every single one of them. They're after the courts to pack it. They're after the electoral college in order to turn the election over to the mass proletariat in democratic cities, and they're after elections. You see that quote election reform and what they did in 2020, and who has confidence in elections anymore? So what speech do we have? Where's our chance to fight what's going on in a way that the country will express itself? The people don't want this, but how can they do it? Big tech, the media being essentially democratic, the colleges being anti-conservative, the schools now teaching grade 1 different forms of masturbating. There's no logic anymore. We're told out of the blue, men and women, there's no difference. It doesn't make any difference what facts are. Adele says that she's proud to be a woman. She's finished. She's canceled. Anybody who says anything that is not counter to their ideology, we have to have some way to protest against this. One of the latest things, the thing which is actually sparking the protest today is the mandates, which are perfect examples of the tentacles of totalitarianism that we see all in the other areas. These mandates, first of all, are unconstitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you have a right to assemble and have free speech, except if we think you're too sick, in which case then the government can take over. But it's so fantastic the extent to which they've carried it. Now, these little kids who are at no real risk, less than 1%, much less than 1%, have to wear masks at their age. It's unbelievable. It's pure power, in this case, motivated by the teachers union, but still through the government and through the order of the Attorney General to treat parents who protested as domestic terrorists. I mean, the government is coming after protests. They're trying to stop people from expressing what they want. So what can we do? The only way, I think, to stop it for a while, to slow it down, is massive physical protest. I don't know of an intellectual way. In the long run, of course, ideas, philosophy, that has to change, and that's the ultimate solution. But right now, it is crucial to make it clear to the world, and the world is going along with the truckers too. I mean, many of the countries, the protest is coming out from underneath, being squelched by an intimidation of law. Is starting to burst out, but we need the physical thing to make it, people see that it's real, that it's nationwide, that it's there. And once you have that, if you can intimidate the intimidators, then we have a chance of going forward directed by ideas and reestablish what America, and I guess I'm Canadian, so to some extent, America and Canada can be put together. I think that a physical protest should be peaceful, but the truckers have been completely peaceful. compared to BLM and Antifa, which were, throwing acid in the eyes of policemen and setting fire to police stations. And you know that nobody said a word about that. Nobody here. It was just, well, they're expressing their freedom. So if they kill a few people or set fire or take over a city, that's okay. But now these truckers only want freedom. They don't want a handout from the government. All they want is to be left alone. So there's a massive outcry on the disaster they're causing, which is a traffic jam. That's what they're causing, that everybody is screaming about. After all the mass disaster that their people caused, now we can't permit this. It's the end of civilization. Now, you know perfectly well that those people are utter hypocrites, utter liars. And I just ask you, if there was a potential trucker strike in the Weimar Republic when Hitler was rising, and they went across the nation denouncing it, and people were rising, suppose that would stop or even slow Hitler. Would you say, oh, well, we can't do that because it's too noisy at night. People can't sleep. I mean, this is just beyond fantastic. So my position is that I salute the truckers. I congratulate them. I thank them on behalf of what is left of the West. And I hope to see that in the United States, still peaceful, but on a form that no one can anymore say, this is the country. No one can say, well, they're obedient, they'll do whatever we say. If this is the first step on that road, I couldn't be happier. Does that give you an idea of my view?
No, I mean, definitely, I wrote you that email saying, how do you feel about the fact that it's going to be a bunch of Canadian truckers who perhaps save the world from this? And I didn't actually know whether you would agree or not. We hadn't spoken for quite some time, but I'm not surprised that we hold, similar views on this. I see the situation a little bit analogous to Edward Snowden, who, got to a point where he had been trying to go up the chain of command. He had been trying, or at least other people have been trying, to get standing in court to challenge these unconstitutional bulk surveillance programs. And what did he do? He broke the terms of his employment contract, of the oath that he'd taken, whatever, in order to do what he thought was necessary to stop this. And of course, recently we heard of another program, right? So it's a similar situation, yes?
Yeah, I agree completely. It's a similar situation. But he tried it on a more intellectual basis. And, they brushed it aside. He's a traitor, et cetera, et cetera. But it was like one individual, pursuing it. He didn't have a country behind him. But now you have a country behind him, and they're starting around the world. So I think there's more chance than there was. He was very brave, but he had to end up in Russia because of the corruption in this country,
I'm hoping at some point he'll get to come back, but there's a few steps, including the truckers succeeding, before we can even hope for something like that. Exactly. So a couple of things. One of the things that strikes me that it made it necessary for the truckers to do this is the fact that the speech option is actually not possible. And the way that I've understood it through this pandemic now is that you have sort of this cabal of the big pharma people, you have the big tech, you have the mainstream media, and of course you have government and you have social media. All of these are working together to clamp down, to squelch so-called misinformation. Right. And you've probably seen as much as we have that what used to be called misinformation last year is now known to be true, stuff like the lab leak theory, et cetera, right?
The pandemic is going away now, or is dying off, and they're making it intense, forcing these mandates, masks, which according to what I know, never did anything to begin with. it's ridiculous. And how can the unvaccinated people hurt the vaccinated people? If the vaccines work
If
as
they work,
say,
yeah.
why is it so crucial for everybody to be
Mhm.
vaccinated? I mean, the whole thing is beyond asinine. It's unbelievable, but we don't get a chance to talk about it. We
No.
don't get a chance to say. You can say to your own little conservative meeting, but there's no coverage. It's completely blanked out. I know conservatives who are trying to organize, but they're having tremendous trouble. But one reason being that the billionaires who fund these things are apparently all far left wing. I haven't heard of a conservative billionaire yet. This is supposed to be a
Elon
Catholic-
Musk. So Elon Musk has donated to the truckers,
Has he
right?
contributed to them?
He's contributed to the truckers, yeah.
All good for him. He was
But see, you
he's
haven't
the
heard
only
that,
one I
right?
thought was good anyway. Sorry.
You hadn't heard that. And see, that's one of the big problems, is that the proliferation of any of the intellectual content is being cut off. So I don't necessarily see the truckers' physical actions as a substitute for intellectual, because I actually see
No,
the
but-
truckers as fairly principled
Yeah, but
but it's a way to get the ideas in.
It's a way of clearing some microscopes, the microphones. It's a way of making the teachers union nervous. It's a way of emboldening some people with the right ideas to speak up, and other people see that, it's possible. It's a way of turning it around. It's not going to be omnipotent.
no,
No
but
one rally like that, however great it is and however much it stops all these people for a moment, can do it. But the hope is that it can be a catalyst. It can be light diffuse and then go on from there. Pick up what's better, because I think there is a large body of the public that's there and that opposes what's going on. But they're intimidated and they don't know what to do about it, and they feel they're alone. So they go along with it. I don't expect miracles from the truckers, but just to open the door for somebody else to say, I have the courage to walk in now.
But doesn't it also exemplify the utter failure of the intellectual part of the population? And at the same time, it is a very encouraging and heartwarming sight to see that, quote unquote, normal people.
Oh, I agree with you. You say it doesn't demonstrate what did you say, the failure of the intellectuals? You don't need to.
Well,
the failure of the intellectuals started in the late 19th century, and by now they're absolutely crazy. I mean, the woke ones. I learned the other day that you cannot any longer use the word picnic, because picnic is something that they used to have in the past, the amusement for which, the entertainment for which was hanging blacks. And therefore we can't use the word picnic. I mean, this is insanity, and it has a purpose. It's not that they're crazy, it's that they're smart. They're going to make you afraid to speak. They're going to take enough words and either corrupt their meaning or ban them. And the result is you get less and less chance to say anything, let alone anybody to hear it. So we're in a very, very, very bad state. And I'm all for ideas. I spend my life writing books, etc. But a book is not going to cure the world now. It's too late for that. If it's not the march, then the only other thing I can foresee is a civil war, which is also going to be physical, or a foreign war. I mean, the way Biden has conducted his policy with Afghanistan and Iran and all the rest of it, we're inviting somebody, there's lots of enemies ready to do it. So it's going to come down to physical resistance, whether against, Russia or anything else that goes on. And that's our only chance.
If you were able to give advice to the leaders of the truckers movement in order to have the maximum effect, not just at maybe stopping things a little while, but perhaps reclaiming all of the rights that the tyrants have grabbed during the pandemic, what would you tell them to say or do?
I have great respect for the truckers, but I don't expect them to lead an intellectual uprising. That is not fair to expect that. Their work is not in that field. They can demand freedom. They can demand that we go back to American, they on that level. But all they can do is raise a banner. They can't argue for it. What they can do is make it possible for people to hear those who have a banner. So I don't ask the truckers to do any more, but keep at it. And you see how monstrous the governments are. When BLM did all that, there was no punishment, no criticism, nothing. And now Trudeau, so I hear, is threatening a $100,000 fine per truck and 1 year in jail. Can you believe that? I grew up in Canada. I had no idea they would be that corrupt. I simply didn't. It wasn't like that in the 1930s when I grew up.
Mm.
Have you gotten at all into the issue of the Great Reset, the whole idea of the World Economic Forum and Schwab and all that, or you have not gone down that particular rabbit hole yet?
I'm not into economics.
Yeah.
Except for being pro-capitalist, but I don't know all the ins and outs of how they're destroying the West.
No, I
But
understand.
One element that I think was an obstacle to those intellectuals that we thought were still there to defend our rights, one obstacle there, it seems, was the idea that anything that can be labeled as science must therefore intrinsically be good and cheered on without any criticism. Is that a characterization that you can recognize or endorse?
I mean, science, but none of this is science. You're going.
But I mean the vaccines, the development of the mRNA technology into a vaccine.
Because it was novel, it had to be the right way to go, and everybody had to either follow.
Are you saying I'm for science, or are you asking, do I think that being for science was dangerous politically, or what?
Well, that being for science could make people accept the vaccine and the mandates more than. I don't
accept that at all. You could just as well say being for truth could make people accept anything they say as truth. So you shouldn't be for any standard then. They're going to distort any standard. But science, as it literally means, is like logic or reason or truth. It stands for, in this case, a specific method of functioning, the use of facts and rational interpretation thereof. And you can see from them that that's just language. They change their mind all the time. Now, recently there was a big poll that the masks are extremely unhappy. So state after state, the governors are dropping them and saying science has changed. Overnight science changed because the poll came in. So it's ridiculous. I'm in favor of science, but I hope you don't equate science with Dr. Fauci. I just heard that Dr. Fauci has an annual income, I forget, $400,000 or something like that. And he's obviously tied into China. So it's just horrendous that that's what they take as science. But they'll corrupt anything. There's no way of trying anything other than science. If you say God, I don't believe in that. But if you say that, they're going to say that that's absolutely untrue. I had a revelation to the opposite. You're distorting the original Hebrew, et cetera, et cetera. There's no way out. You can't talk to those people. No way at all. And you can't stop them from lying. You can only talk to the people who don't know what's going on and want to find out. And by the way, I'd like to recommend a book there called American Marxism by
Levin, right?
Mark Levin, right.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very good book, and it was #1 for a long, long time on Amazon bestsellers. And it has a lot of very good things. And I take it as a hope that, there's something that can be done intellectually, but it's a terrific supplement if it's not only #1, but there's something going on in the real world that people can see,
With the development of the vaccine, having been done in partnership with government, and then these agreements between the big pharma companies that keep it secret and the legal immunity, et cetera. Would you have allowed that if you were in charge of the situation? I mean, what would you think would be the right way to develop vaccines in a pandemic if you could wave a magic wand?
Well, if we had a free country and they were aware that this was a possibility, and if there were real competition with no reference to the government, I think they would certainly have fought each other. But in the condition where you can't initiate anything without 5 years through the FDA, and you're going to be taxed massively, and who knows who's going to buy them, they're afraid to take that kind of risk. I don't accept big as a criticism, as a pejorative. I'm all for big business, big pharma, big athletes, you name it. That just means successful. They're achieving something, as opposed to the little guy who's crushed out. I think he should have a shot at it. But if he succeeds, through the favors, the regulations, and so on of big government, then he should be knocked out, which I think is partly true of big tech, because they're supported by the government protection that's not given to any other publication, any other publisher. But if someone really makes a success, like Elon Musk, for instance, is doing extremely well without government aid, what do you call him? A big space behind him. But I think big is a compliment.
Right. So you would look at it more about the special sorts of favors that government is giving to these companies versus just big. Yes. So probably the big shorthand is not the handiest, right?
I can't say what people would do, but I don't think they could have done worse than they're doing with the government. They're working toward a dictatorship for the country. They started off with a lockdown, which has now been proved even by WHO to be a disaster, and locked the country down. They, all the side effects of that, the suicides and the drug addiction, etc. And they said it was just for a few months and we flattened the curve. And we're not, starting the third year now, I believe.
Over 600 days for sure, yes.
And they're still talking about masks for little kids. It's obviously a power play. There's nothing, and all the cases where they catch these elite politicians without the mask. In big restaurants, French Laundry, and Obama's birthday, etc. They don't have any worry about that. So I can talk about this forever, but I think I'm repeating.
Well, I'll ask you a question that's personally relevant to me, right? Because I'm working for a social media platform that's competing with these other ones.
Parler, right?
Parler, that's right.
Parler, that's the home of anybody who's not a communist, basically.
It's the best home of anybody who's not a communist anyway, right? No, I mean, right now Twitter has been banning, for instance, a citizen reporter who was reporting on.
So.
Well, if that's true, ban the former president as well. So while he was president, so that's definitely not a good thing. But can you clarify what because there's been this discussion about whether it would be appropriate to term what those big platforms are doing as censorship. And in my view, if you have them essentially volunteering to remove speech in accordance with government wishes, even though there's no law that is mandating them to, right?
Formally.
But
I agree that it's quasi-censorship. In other words, they're doing what they're doing with the consent of the government, and according to Jen Psaki, they actually tell them what to say, what they want to hear. So it's a de facto censorship.
So censorship by
if
proxy.
they didn't have that insurance policy, if they didn't have approval of the government, then they could do or bar anybody they wanted. But by that very fact, it would have to be restricted to what people choose. And there would be competition like you're providing. And if there's something left in the country, if there are more truckers coming around, they'll turn around to you or to whoever gives them a chance. But right now, corruption is in charge, and the kids are coming out of school completely corrupted. So it's a big spectacle. But I still think censorship is the wrong word. It's de facto censorship because of the government.
Yeah. Or
Well,
your turn.
Yeah, so there's a legal doctrine that is going to be used in some of the cases, including the lawsuit that former President Trump has filed. It's called a state action theory. And the legal theory is that once the government provides a certain combination of carrots and sticks and legal immunity for a certain type of conduct, that if the so-called private entity engages in that conduct, you can refer to it as state action. So in this case, the legal immunity comes under that section 230 that you've heard so much about.
I'm sorry to say, I'm not an attorney.
Sure.
I don't know the ins and outs of what you're saying.
But
you just toss off a broad philosophic comment. No.
Sure. So you would say de facto censorship is fair in this sense.
Yeah.
Given what
I
you
can't say whether if you give a carrot to an ex-president, he's thereby allowed so and so. I don't know that.
Fair enough. So I think we've got pretty much what the topics. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add on the current events of any kind?
Everything I have to say about truckers, I've said. I have some notes here, but I'm not going to go through them. I think I've got the key points here.
Okay, well, we thank you for this, and we will, of course, put this out there in the world with your permission so that it can get out there to a wide audience.
I just want to end by saying I salute the truckers. I wish them the best. I congratulate them, and don't let them stop you. Thank you.
We
Amen.
agree. Thank you. Amen.
Okay.